Hey y'all, I'm Carolina Tony. Today the road brings me to Weston, West Virginia, and I'm standing outside of the Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. And hey, we get to go inside, and I'm gonna take you with me. We'll learn a little bit about mental disorders and all the things that have gone on here. And we'll do that, but right after this station identification.
All right, I've got my ticket and I've got my mask on, and we are going inside. And I get to tour a little bit of the museum prior to meeting up with the tour guide. Because of rules and regulations, I wasn't able to film any of the audio, so I'm having to come back and do a voiceover. But I promise you, there's some stuff in this video on towards the middle and the end that will curl your hair. Some pretty gross stuff. There are a lot of things in this museum that used to be in the hospital back when it was in its prime. Photographs of doctors and some of the things that were used at the hospital. A lot of typewriters and a lot of items used by the patients themselves. Wood things for the wood shop. Even a violin. I guess that was some type of musical therapy. And this was found in the basement. Some type of humidifier, I think. Down through the years, all types of uniforms were worn by the doctors and nurses. And from what I understand, they were even small children in this hospital. Big collection of prosthetics. And even a coffin. And we'll see more of that as the tour goes on. It's an old icebox. And wow, I had that same icebox at home. Here are some different types of mental disorders that are abundant in this world today. There goes one of the nurses. The Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was constructed between 1858 and 1861, and it is the largest hand-cut masonry and stone building in North America, and they say it is the second largest in the world next to the Kremlin. Now, some of this hospital has been restored to look as it did around 1910, 1915. Some is left to what they called urban decay. And there are a lot of examples of what things used to look like. Like here was a dining room, and of course, lots of photographs of old patients' rooms. The original hospital was designed to house 250 people. And it was open to patients in 1864, and it reached its peak in the 1950s with 2,400 patients in overcrowded and generally poor conditions. And this is some of the urban decay. This is what the room looks like now. That was what it looked like then. So they tried to decorate it according to what the pictures were. The windows were designed so that you could look out right there without seeing the bars. This would have been a playroom, a nurse's station behind there. There is a gargoyle. They believe that gargoyles would ward away the evil spirits, and there are several of them atop the building. As you can see, the different colors of the stone indicate when they started building and when they would stop, because it took them 20 years to build a building. Here's some more gargoyles that are about the asylum. And there are copies of. This was a ward for lots of patients. This is after. That's before. Same room, full of beds. This was a kitchen. This hospital is 1/4 mile long, and all these stone are all perfectly level with the next. This is another ward here. And the dispensary where they kept some pretty wicked medicines. Behind the lunatic asylum is a medical hospital where patients would go for various ailments. This was an elevator shaft that would take the deceased out to the waiting hearse. An examining room right next to the morgue. This is one of the caskets left over from the old days. And this is actually a refrigerated unit where they would keep the bodies. They could keep up to 2 in that particular refrigerator. Another examining room. That looks like a hairdryer. There were patients here up until 1994. We are now going into the geriatric side of the hospital. This would have been one of the open areas in the old folks' home. This nurse's station was designed to overlook the area for the men as well as for the women on the other side. We're going to go downstairs, see a painting done for possibly some of the patients. This was the facility where they kept the hardened criminals. They would come here first to be assessed before they would be released into the general asylum. This area has been brought back to look like what it would look like in 1872. This would have been where the hospital administrator would have stayed with his family. been in the dining room for the nurses and doctors. This was a pharmacy. They said they did not have a pharmacist on staff, so the doctors would make their own drugs. This would have been the doctor's office. This would have been the library and the steward's office. He took care of all the bookkeeping and records. This is a room of Jane Harvey, who died by suicide in 1885. She ripped the sheets from her bed and hung herself from the doorknob. Later, the doorknobs were replaced. I was told that often when female patients were admitted to the hospital and they had children, but no one to watch their children, that their children would be admitted with them. And most of the time, being in that environment was not a good thing for the children, because they wound up staying too. This was an examining room. This was one of the rooms where they would keep violent patients. The places on the wall that's been cemented over, buckles would be installed, hooked to leather straps, so the patient would be strapped in the center of the room so they couldn't hurt themselves. Later, they decided that was inhumane and they done away with it. We have an example coming up. This is where a violent patient beat the metal door in. This is where, these rooms is where they kept the violent patients. You can see there's an example of one chained to the wall. There were a lot of murders at this hospital, and they do have paranormal tours as well. I think this is probably the creepiest thing of all. Ironically, this was a sleeping room. Folks traveling could stay at the hospital if there was room, and they would rent your room out, kind of like a motel. This would have been a doctor's quarters where the doctor and his family would stay. This would have been the nurses' apartments. Not quite as fancy as the doctor's apartments. The nurses were paid $15 a month, and $12 a month were taken from their pay for room and board.
Okay, well that is going to end our tour at the West Virginia Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give me a big old thumbs up. Be sure to share this video with your family and friends. And until next time, y'all have a good day.